A single candle burned in the window of a woman who had already lost everything. Its flame trembled against the damp glass, fighting the wind that slipped through the cracks of an old Manchester house. Outside, the streets were quiet, coated with a thin silver mist, and every cobblestone seemed to remember a voice that no longer spoke. Her name was Anna Hewson, and though the city still moved around her factories breathing smoke, carts rolling through the fog, her world had stopped months ago, on the day the telegram came. Since then, she lived by routine: light the candle at dusk, watch it until dawn, and whisper the same question into the dark that never answered. But that night, something changed. The candle's flame bent suddenly, though no window was open. A faint sound of footstep, perhaps, or just a shift in the wind code from the street below. And for the first time in weeks, Anna rose from her chair and looked out. The fog swirled like memory, soft and shapeless. Somewhere in it, a small light moved, too steady to be a trick of the eye, too alive to be a reflection. It drifted slowly down the street, vanishing, then reappearing farther away, as if someone or something was carrying it toward the river. Anna pressed her palm to the cold glass. A strange calm filled her chest, the kind that comes before tears or miracles. Without really knowing why, she took her shawl, blew out the candle, and stepped into the night. Behind her, the room fell into silence. Only the faint scent of wax remained, curling through the air like a promise. The street outside whispered beneath her feet. Rain had stopped hours ago, but the air still shimmered with dampness. The gas lamps hummed softly, their halos breathing in and out with the fog. Anna's shoes left pale reflections in the puddles as she followed the faint, flickering light that had drawn her from her chair. It was strange how the city could feel both alive and asleep at once. From some distance, she could hear the faint turning of gears a mill still running, refusing to rest. Somewhere else, the low hum of a carriage wheel, the muffled laughter of late workers finding their way home. But here, on this narrow lane, there was only her heartbeat and the soft sigh of her own breath. The light ahead paused. It hovered by the corner of a brick warehouse, then vanished again. Anna stopped too, her hands trembling slightly against her shawl. Perhaps it was nothing. Perhaps her grief had finally taken a shape of its own. But the soft curiosity within her, something she hadn't felt in months, urged her on. She turned the corner. There, beside the river's edge, stood an old lamplighter. He was tall, his back bent from years of climbing iron posts. A bundle of tools hung from his shoulder, and a long pole with a flickering flame rested in his hand. He hadn't noticed her. He moved slowly, with the patience of someone who'd learned to work with the wind. At every lamp he stopped, lifted his pole, and with a soft motion awakened the flame. One after another, the street came to life. A soft golden trail through the mist, the same light Anna had seen from her window. For a moment she simply watched him, mesmerized. Each lamp that flared seemed to bring the world back into focus, the sheen of the wet cobblestones, the glint of iron railings, the faint reflection of her own face in the water. When he reached the last post, he turned toward her, surprised. "Oh," he said softly. "Didn't see you there, miss." Anna hesitated. I thought I saw a light moving." The man nodded slowly, eyes kind beneath his soot-lined cap. "Then you did. Sometimes the light needs to wander before it finds where it belongs." She didn't know what to say to that. The words hung in the air like smoke, mysterious and simple, all at once. "Long night for walking," he added, resting his pole. I couldn't sleep, she admitted. Ah, he smiled faintly. The city rarely lets anyone sleep easily. Too many hearts dreaming at once. They stood together in the fog for a while, neither speaking. The river whispered below, carrying the faint reflection of lamplight. Then, almost to herself, Anna said, I used to light a candle every night for someone who never came home. The lamplighter's eyes softened. That's a good thing to do, he said. Light reminds the dark that it doesn't own everything. She smiled weakly. And do you believe that? He looked up at the row of lamps he had just lit. I've seen too many nights end to stop believing in mornings. Something in his voice steadied her heartbeat. Not comfort exactly, but quiet understanding, the kind that doesn't try to fix, only to share the silence. After a moment, he nodded to her, lifted his pole, and disappeared down another street, swallowed by the fog and his own quiet purpose. Anna remained by the river. The water moved slow and heavy, carrying glimmers of reflected firelight. She leaned against the railing, the iron cool beneath her fingers. For the first time in a long while, she noticed how beautiful the night really was. Not in the way of music or color, but in texture, in the way sound softened around her, in the way every breath felt like it carried the ghost of something gentle. Somewhere far away, a church bell chimed midnight. The sound rolled across the rooftops, soft as a heartbeat. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, the fog had begun to lift just slightly. Across the river, she could make out faint outlines, the skeletons of mills, chimneys standing tall like monuments, and rows of windows that glowed faintly with candlelight. She imagined the lives behind each one, a mother humming to a child, a young worker mending his only shirt, two lovers whispering promises they could never keep. Manchester was a city of effort and endurance. It breathed in the same rhythm as its people, slow, heavy, and somehow tender. Anna watched until her reflection began to fade into the darkness of the water. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like a shadow among shadows. On her walk back, she noticed details she had long stopped seeing. The faint chalk drawing on a wall to stick figures holding hands, a cat sleeping under a broken cart, a sign outside the bakery that read, "Fresh bread at dawn." All small things, ordinary things, yet each one felt like the city, quietly whispering, I'm still here. When she reached her street, the fog had thinned enough for her to see the outline of her house again. The window upstairs still held the faintest trace of wax smoke, curling outward like a sigh. She hesitated before going in. There was something peaceful about the night air, the softness of it, the patience. It didn't rush her, it let her breathe. She sat on the steps and listened. Somewhere, someone was playing a violin softly, faintly, like a dream you almost remember. The melody drifted through the damp air, slow and tender. Each note lingered, as if afraid to leave. Anna closed her eyes again, letting the sound fill the space inside her that had been quiet for too long. The music spoke in a language beyond words. It carried sorrow, yes, but not disparage, the gentle ache of remembering. When the last note faded, the silence that followed was soft, like a blanket settling over the world. She rose and went inside. The house welcomed her with the familiar scent of wood and coal. She lit the candle once more, not from ritual now, but from quiet gratitude. The flame steadied immediately, strong and even. She sat by the window again, hands folded in her lap, and watched the soft orange glow fill the corners of the room. The wind outside had gentled, Even the creaks in the wood seemed to breathe easier. Anna reached for the small wooden box on her table. Inside was the telegram, folded, frayed, and stained with time. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. She simply touched it, as if acknowledging the memory without letting it own her. The candle flame swayed gently, and its light touched her face. There were lines of weariness there, but also the faintest echo of peace. Outside, the lamplighter's trail still glowed through the foggage post, standing like a sentinel of warmth. And though she couldn't see him anymore, Anna could almost hear his voice in the wind. Light reminds the dark that it doesn't own everything. Slowly, her eyes began to close. The rhythm of her breath matched the distant hum of the city. Somewhere, a cart rolled by, its wheels whispering against the stones. Somewhere else, a clock ticked past another minute, patient and steady. The candlelight pulsed softly on the wall, moving like a heartbeat. And as she drifted toward sleep, Anna thought of the boy she'd once loved, the one who had promised to take her away from this city. He was gone, yes, but in the quiet between waking and dreaming, she could almost feel his hand again, guiding her gently through the mist. In her half-sleep, she imagined him walking beside her through the lamplight, whispering, "Tomorrow will shine," and somewhere deep within her, she believed it. The city outside finally stilled. The factories were silent. The smoke curled into silver threads. The river moved like a slow breath under the pale moonlight. Every lamp, every window, every candle seemed to join in one quiet rhythm, the heartbeat of Manchester itself. And in that rhythm, Anna's heartbeat softened until her breath and the city's breath became one. The flame on the window flickered once, then steadied, strong and golden, keeping its small promise through the night. Morning came softly, not as a burst of color, but as a hush that crept across the city. The fog thinned into threads of silver, and the first light of day touched the chimneys, turning their smoke to gold. Inside the narrow house on Brook Street, the candle still burned in the window, its flame smaller now, tired but unextinguished. Anna stirred in her chair. The world around her was tinted in the pale blue of early dawn. Her hair had fallen loose, her hands folded over the telegram that rested on her lap. For a moment, she didn't remember falling asleep. She only remembered the lamplighter's words echoing faintly in her dreams. When she opened her eyes, she noticed something strange. The wax of the candle had melted in a perfect circle on the table, forming a shallow pool that reflected the light like a miniature sunrise. In that reflection, she saw movement, faint ripples, as if someone had touched the surface, though no one was there. The sight stirred something inside her, a sense of quiet wonder mixed with unease. She rose, stretching her stiff limbs, and walked to the window. The street below was still half asleep. Milk carts rattled distantly, their wheels creaking through puddles. A few workers hurried toward the mills, collars turned up against the chill. But near the river, where the lamplighter had disappeared hours ago, she saw something that made her breath pause. One of the lamps, the last in the row, still burned brightly, too brightly. Its flame shimmered with a color she had never seen before. Not quite orange, not quite gold, but something between sunlight and memory. And though the wind brushed past it, the flame did not sway. Anna pressed her forehead to the glass. The same calm curiosity that had drawn her from her chair the night before returned, warmer this time. Perhaps the lamplighter had come back to check his work. Or perhaps the light itself wanted to be seen. She dressed quickly, wrapped her shawl, and stepped outside. The morning air carried the clean scent of wet stone. Birds began to stir along the rooftops, their calls faint but hopeful. As Anna walked, the fog lifted around her like curtains parting before a stage. The city, in its early light, looked almost kind. Yet, even in that kindness, there was mystery. She noticed details she hadn't before. A narrow door built into the side of a warehouse, its handle polished, though the wall was black with soot. A pattern of chalk lines drawn on the pavement, spirals within spirals, as if some child had been tracing stars. Manchester, she thought, hid its secrets in plain sight. When she reached the riverbank, the strange flame was still there, steady, silent, impossibly bright. The air around it felt warmer, though the morning was cool. Anna stood before it for a long while, her heartbeat matching the gentle hum that seemed to come from the lamp itself. Then, without warning, the flame flickered once and bent sideways, as if bowing toward her. Inside the glass, she thought she saw a shadow move, a brief shape, human and familiar. She blinked, and it was gone. But a single drop of wax, golden and soft, rolled down the metal post and landed at her feet. She bent to touch it. It was warm, almost alive. When she lifted her fingers, the wax left a faint mark on her skin, a small circle, perfectly round, that glowed faintly before fading. "Strange, isn't it?" a voice said behind her. Anna turned. The lamplighter stood there, his cap pulled low, his coat damp from the mist. He smiled, though his eyes carried the quiet exhaustion of someone who'd seen too many nights. "You again," she said softly, half embarrassed at being caught. "Seems the city meant for us to meet twice," he replied. He walked past her and looked up at the glowing lamp. "Burns brighter than it should," he murmured. "That one always does. Why?" He glanced at her, the hint of a smile ghosting across his lips. "Some lamps remember more than others." Anna frowned. "Remember?" He nodded slowly, tapping the pole against the ground. "You live in a city built from memory, miss. Every brick, every flame, every echo of a footstep, all of it keeps what it's seen. Some lights, though, refuse to forget." She wanted to laugh, to call it nonsense, but something in his tone, soft, almost reverent, held her still. "Do you believe that?" she asked. "I have to," he said simply. "It's what keeps me lighting them." They stood together in the hush of morning, the river gliding beneath them like a sheet of glass. The sound of distant machinery began to stir, the first sighs of the waking mills. Anna turned toward him again. "What's your name?" He looked at her for a long moment, as though trying to remember. "Elias," he said finally. "At least, that's the name I answer to." Something about the way he said it made her wonder how many names he had carried before. As the day unfolded, the light softened, losing its unnatural brilliance. Elias adjusted the wick with his long pole and nodded with quiet satisfaction. "Better," he said. "It's ready for another night." Anna hesitated. "Will you be here again?" He smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening. "If the city lets me." Then he turned and walked away, his footsteps fading into the growing hum of morning. Anna watched until he vanished behind the corner. Only then did she notice something glimmering on the base of the lamp where he stood, a small metal token, no bigger than a coin, engraved with a symbol she didn't recognize, a circle surrounded by tiny rays, like a miniature sun. She picked it up, the cool metal pressing into her palm. It felt heavier than it should, as though it held a secret of its own. The rest of the day drifted quietly. Anna returned to her work at the textile mill, the clatter of looms and threads weaving around her like a storm of rhythm. The air smelled of oil and cotton. Her hands moved mechanically, Yet her mind replayed the morning again and again, the glowing lamp, the warmth of the wax, the strange coin with its silent sun. During the afternoon break, she pulled the token from her pocket and studied it in the light of the factory window. The symbol was perfectly carved, too precise for a trinket. Around the edges, she noticed faint letters, Lux Memoriam. She mouthed the words slowly. Light remembers. The phrase made her skin prickle. That night, she lit her candle earlier than usual. The flame rose with a steady glow, mirroring the lamps outside her window. She placed the metal token beside it, half expecting it to catch the light in some unusual way. But it only sat there, dull and silent. Outside, the city began to fold into itself again, doors closing, voices dimming, the hum of machines softening into stillness. Yet beneath that quiet, she sensed something alive, a pulse she hadn't noticed before. Manchester was breathing again, and she was listening. At 10:30, she heard it, a faint tapping at the window pane. 3 slow taps, evenly spaced. She froze. The street below was empty, but at the corner, barely visible through the fog, a single lamp burned brighter than the rest, the same one. Without thinking, Anna wrapped her shawl and went down the stairs. Her landlady's cat brushed past her legs, meowing softly, as if trying to warn her of something unseen. But she stepped out anyway, her curiosity stronger than fear. The air was thick again, the fog heavy and fragrant with coal smoke. The lamps along the street formed a soft, golden tunnel. At the end of it, the bright lamp pulsed faintly, 1, 2, 3 times, like a heartbeat calling her forward. When she reached it, the light dimmed to its normal glow. The street was empty. Only the faint hum of the river filled the silence. She looked around. No Elias, no footsteps, nothing. Then she noticed the base of the lamp again. The metal token she'd found that morning was gone from her pocket. She touched her coat, certain she'd placed it there, but it was gone. Her breath caught. The lamp above her flickered once more, and the word memoriam whispered through her mind, like a voice not her own. Suddenly, the sound of metal on stone broke the stillness. From behind her, Ilias's voice called softly, "I thought you'd come." She turned. He was standing in the fog again, the pole resting on his shoulder, eyes faintly illuminated by the nearby glow. "What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling but not afraid. He looked at her gently. "Every night I light the lamps so the city can dream safely," he said. "But some dreams need help finding their way back to the light." She frowned. "Dreams." He stepped closer, lowering his pole. "You keep a candle burning for someone who never returned. You think that light was only yours." Anna's breath hitched. "How do you the lamps remember, Anna? They carry the glow of every candle ever lit in this city. Sometimes, when a heart holds too much grief, one lamp burns brighter. It's the city's way of saying, this story isn't finished yet." His words sent a chill through her, yet not of fear, of recognition. "And the token?" she asked. "It was yours," he said softly. "Once. Long ago." He reached into his coat and drew something from within, another token, identical to hers. He placed it in her hand. This one was warm, pulsing faintly, as though alive. "Hold it," he whispered. She did. The warmth spread through her palm, up her arm, and into her chest. The noise of the city faded, the mills, the footsteps, even the wind. For a moment, she felt suspended between waking and dreaming, and then she saw him, standing just beyond the lamplight, the shape of a man she knew by heart, the face she had kissed goodbye before the war. His eyes were soft, his smile faint, his presence fragile as breath. "Thomas," she whispered. The lamplighter lowered his gaze, stepping back. The light from the lamp curved gently around the apparition, turning it golden. Thomas looked at her, his voice a whisper carried by wind. "I couldn't come home," he said, "but I never left." Tears blurred her vision, yet she smiled. The warmth in her chest became light, soft, endless, forgiving. "Is this real?" she asked. Ilias's voice came from somewhere behind her, low and kind, as real as the heart that remembers. The figure of Thomas reached forward, his hand brushing the air near her cheek, a touch she couldn't feel, yet somehow did. And then, slowly, he faded with the first hint of dawn returning to the sky. Anna stood silently, her heart still glowing. The lamp above her dimmed to its ordinary flame. The token in her palm cooled, its light settling into a quiet pulse. She turned to Elias, but he was already walking away. His silhouette dissolved into the pale morning mist, leaving only his voice behind. "Keep the candle, Anna. It knows the way home." When the sun rose fully, Manchester shimmered like glass after rain. Workers filled the streets, the smell of bread drifted from the bakery, and the world carried on as if nothing had happened. Yet, inside Anna, something subtle had shifted. Back at her window, she placed the token beside her candle once more. The wax around its base had hardened into the same perfect circle as before, but this time it caught the sunlight and gleamed like gold. She smiled quietly, whispering to herself, "Light remembers." And somewhere outside, across the waking city, the lamplighter began his rounds again, one flame at a time, each one a memory, each one a promise that even in the thickest fog, the heart always finds its way home. The candle had burned itself into stillness. Its final curl of smoke rose through the sunlight like a whisper leaving the room. Outside, the city awakened, once more factory horns calling, children laughing faintly in the streets, the endless rumble of carts over stone. Yet Anna stood by her window and listened not to the noise but to the echo beneath it, the quiet rhythm that pulsed through everything. "Light remembers." The words lingered as surely as the faint circle of wax on her table. The small metal token lay beside it, cool again, ordinary in appearance, but impossible to ignore. When she turned it over, she thought she saw the tiniest shimmer running along the engraved rays, as if a hidden sun still breathed inside. She slipped it into her pocket before leaving for work. The world outside smelled of damp wool and coal, but beneath it she sensed a new note, something sweet, almost metallic, like rain on brass. The streets looked the same, yet she felt watched, not with malice, but with quiet recognition, as though the city itself now knew her by name. At the mill, the day passed in a steady blur of motion. The great weaving halls thundered with sound, belts spinning, shuttles clattering, looms pounding out the rhythm of progress. But even through the din, Anna found herself glancing toward the high windows where sunlight filtered through the dust. Each particle seemed alive, moving with deliberate grace. Sometimes, when the light hit her hands, just so, she thought she could see faint threads of gold connecting her fingertips to the air. During the midday break, she escaped to the small courtyard behind the factory. There, a stray cat with mottled fur dozed atop a crate. The air was cool, and the faint hum of machinery sounded distant enough to become almost musical. She pulled the token from her pocket and traced its edge. The inscription Lux Memoriam caught the light, and for a heartbeat the letters glowed as if freshly engraved. Beautiful piece, a voice said behind her. Anna turned. A man in a suit-dark apron stood near the doorway, a mechanic from the boiler room. His hands were blackened with oil, his eyes curious but kind. "It's nothing," she said quickly, slipping the token away. "Nothing shines like that unless it's meant to," he said with a small smile. "You'd be surprised what stories travel through this mill. Every beam here has seen more than any of us." She studied him. There was something in his tone, quiet knowing, similar to the lamplighters. "Do you believe that? That places remember?" He shrugged. "Everything built by hands keeps a bit of the heart that built it. That's how machines work too. They only move because someone once believed they could." Before she could answer, a whistle blew, summoning them back to their posts. The mechanic tipped his cap and disappeared into the haze of steam. Anna lingered a moment longer. She felt the token's warmth through her dress pocket, faint but steady, as though agreeing with him. That night the fog returned, thick and silvery, muffling the city until it seemed half asleep again. Anna stood by her window, candle unlit, watching the lamps emerge one by one. Each flare of light looked ordinary except for the one nearest the river. Its flame pulsed, slow and deliberate, 3 times in a row. Her heart quickened. She grabbed her shawl and stepped into the mist. Down by the river, the air smelled of wet iron and moss. The glowing lamp waited, serene and steady. Yet tonight, something new shimmered around its base, a faint circle of chalk drawn on the cobblestones, almost identical to the spiral patterns she had noticed days before. At the center of that circle lay another token, twin to her own. Anna crouched to pick it up. The metal was cold, but when she held it, she felt a rush of images, flashes of light, glimpses of faces, fleeting laughter. The sensations faded almost instantly, leaving only a soft hum inside her ears. "You found it." She looked up. Elias stood on the other side of the lamp, the fog swirling around his boots. Tonight, his coat looked darker, his face more solemn. "What are these tokens?" she asked quietly. He hesitated, then stepped into the glow. "Keys," he said. "Each one opens a memory that doesn't want to be lost." Manchester was built over centuries of light, candles in windows, lamps on corners, fires in mills. The city remembers through flame. These are what keep the memories anchored. Whose memory is this one? Elias studied the token in her hand. "That's what we have to find out." He extended his palm. When she placed the token there, he closed his fingers around it and whispered something she couldn't hear. The lamp above them flickered once, and a faint ripple of light spread outward across the street, like a breath traveling through water. From the fog, a new shape emerged, a faint figure walking slowly, head bowed. It shimmered faintly, neither solid nor ghost, clothed in the faint glow of lamplight. Anna stepped back, her pulse quickening. The figure paused before them. She could see now it was a woman, older than herself, wearing the simple dress of a mill worker. The woman's face was tired but kind, her hands clasped as if in prayer. "Who are you?" Anna whispered. The woman lifted her gaze. "Someone who waited too long for the morning," she said. Her voice was barely more than a breath. Elias nodded solemnly. "You see her because the lamp remembers her sorrow. Every night she walked this path, searching for her son who never came home from the factory. The light kept her vigil when she could not." Anna's eyes burned. "And now? She has been waiting for someone to notice," Elias said softly. "Light remembers, but it needs witnesses." Anna stepped closer to the apparition. "You can rest now," she whispered. "He's remembered. You're both remembered." The woman smiled faintly. As the lamp flickered once more, her form dissolved into the mist, leaving only a swirl of golden dust that drifted upward into the flame. For a long moment, neither Anna nor Elias spoke. Then he looked at her with something like pride. "The city chose you," he said quietly. "Chose me for what? To carry its memory forward. To light what's gone dark." She wanted to ask more, but he was already turning away. "Elias," he paused. "How do I know which lights remember?" He smiled faintly, not looking back. "They'll call you, the same way this one did." And with that, he disappeared into the fog once again, leaving her beneath the steady glow of the remembering lamp. Over the next week, Anna began to see the city differently. Every evening after work, she walked the streets as the lamps came alive. Some burned normally. Others gave off faint pulses, rhythms she began to recognize as patterns. One long, two short, one long, almost like breathing. She kept a small notebook hidden under her mattress, where she drew maps of where each living lamp stood. The pattern formed a winding line that traced the curve of the river, then looped back through the old market square. The line ended near a district she had rarely visited, Angel Meadow, a place most people avoided after dark. The name lingered in her thoughts. One evening she packed her courage, lit her candle, and began to walk there. The lamps along the route flickered faintly as she passed, as if acknowledging her journey. Angel Meadow greeted her with silence. The ground was uneven, the air colder. Old buildings leaned against each other like weary men. Yet in the middle of the narrow square stood a single intact lamp taller than the rest, its glass tinted amber instead of clear. When she approached, she saw words carved faintly into its metal base, for those who worked by light and died in dark. Her breath caught. She reached out and touched the base. The moment her fingers brushed the metal, warmth spread through her hand. The lamp flared brightly, and the world around her shifted. She was no longer standing in an empty square. Instead, the place shimmered with life. The hum of voices, the clang of tools, the laughter of children playing near the mills. Men and women hurried past her carrying baskets of coal, bolts of cloth, crates of bread. It was Manchester. But not as it was now. It was alive with color and sound, years younger, untouched by soot. Amid the bustle, she saw Elias moving through the crowd, lighting lamps, even though the sun was still up. When he noticed her, he smiled gently, as if he had been expecting her. "You've stepped into memory," he said. "The lamp opened its heart to you." Anna turned in wonder. "All this, it's real. It was real once. The lamps keep it alive." She watched the people around her, their faces soft and warm. Then she noticed something else. Some of them glowed faintly, as though made of the same light as the lamps. "Are they memories too?" Elias nodded. "The city remembers not just sorrow, but kindness. Every smile, every act of grace, every moment someone shared their warmth. These are the lights that never fade." Anna felt tears prick her eyes. "It's beautiful. It's your task now," Elias said, "to keep these lights alive in the hearts of others." Before she could respond, the vision began to fade. The sounds dimmed, the colors drained, and she was once again standing alone in the cold square of Angel Meadow. The lamp's flame settled back into its gentle glow. At its base lay another token. She picked it up carefully, holding it to her chest. When she looked up again, Elias was gone, but the faint echo of his words lingered in the air. "Keep the lights alive." Days passed. Anna's routine changed quietly. At night, she walked with her candle and her notebook, tracing new patterns through the city. Sometimes, strangers joined her for a moment, an old woman who said the lamps made her dreams gentler. A young child who claimed to see people made of stars dancing in the fog. Anna listened, smiled, and never told them what she truly knew. Word spread that the lamps in Manchester were burning brighter that winter. People said it was because of a new lamplighter, though none could describe him clearly. Others said the lights seemed warmer, more peaceful, as if the city itself had grown kinder. Anna never corrected them. She simply kept walking, one lamp at a time. On a late evening near Christmas, she returned to her own street. Her candle burned low, its wax forming the same perfect circle on the table. She looked out at the lamps she had come to know so well. At the far corner, one flickered gently, the same lamp where it had all begun. She smiled, whispering, "I remember." The flame steadied, as if answering. Anna closed her eyes and rested her head against the glass. The faint hum of the city cradled her, steady and kind. The fog outside shimmered, just enough for her to imagine the faint outline of a figure moving between the lamps, lighting each one with infinite care. Elias, his silhouette, paused beneath her window for a heartbeat. Then he looked up, smiled once more, and disappeared into the night, leaving behind a trail of golden calm that drifted upward like a lullaby. And as Manchester slept beneath its endless canopy of smoke and stars, the lamps glowed softly, each one holding the heartbeat of a story that refused to die. Morning came to Manchester, as if the city itself exhaled after a long, gentle dream. Mist lifted from the river, revealing rooftops still silvered with dew. The lamps that had glowed through the night dimmed one by one, their glass cooling, their flames surrendering to daylight. In a small house at the corner of Whitworth Street, Anna woke to the faint scent of wax and coal dust. Her candle had gone out hours ago, leaving only the thin ring of wax upon the table, her quiet signature upon the dark. She rose slowly, wrapped her shawl, and stood by the window. The light outside was pale and new, the kind of light that made old bricks seem to breathe. It was the day after the longest night of the year, and something in the air felt expectant. The fog was thinner, the sound of the mills softer, as though the city were waiting for her to speak first. Anna touched the second token, the tiny flame-shaped one end, felt a warmth that was not of fire, but of memory. "Keep the lights alive," Elias had said. Yet she still did not know who he truly was. Each night, since their last meeting, she had walked the streets, lighting what lamps she could, tracing the paths that formed the map in her notebook. She had learned to feel the quiet pulse of each flame, to sense the difference between mere fire and remembering light. Still, the pattern was incomplete. One circle remained open in the center of her map, a place she had not yet visited, the great square before the cathedral. She had always avoided that square. It was where her husband's regiment had marched away, and where the telegram had found her months later. But the pattern was clear now. The final light waited there. She knew, in the soft way one knows when to breathe, that the story would not rest until she went. The streets were alive with mourning. Horses clopped over cobblestones, merchants lifted shutters, and children chased each other through curling clouds of steam. Yet, as Anna walked, a hush followed her. Lamps that should have been extinguished still glowed faintly as she passed, their light bending toward her like flowers turning to the sun. People noticed, some paused to watch her, but no one spoke. Perhaps they thought she was merely a widow lost in thought, carrying a candle in daylight. Perhaps they felt, deep down, that she was carrying something of their own memories too. When she reached the cathedral square, she stopped. The air there was stiller, touched by the slow tolling of the morning bell. At the center stood the oldest lamp in the city, forged long before gas or electricity. Its iron stem, carved with faint symbols, worn smooth by weather. Its flame still burned, though no lamplighter had touched it since dawn. Around its base lay the faint outline of another chalk circle, older, larger, drawn perhaps years ago. Anna stepped inside it. The instant her foot crossed the line, the noise of the city receded. Sound thinned, color softened, and the world folded into quiet light. She felt neither fear nor surprise, only recognition, like returning to a room she had dreamed of many times. The lamp flared once. A low hum filled the air, spreading through the square like a heartbeat. And then, from the brightness, Elias emerged. He looked the same as ever, the suit-dark coat, the calm eyes, the gentleness that belonged to another century. But the light behind him made his edges shimmer, as if he were not entirely of this world. "You found the final circle," he said. Anna's voice trembled. "Was it waiting for me?" "For someone who could see it," he replied. "Every city has its guardian, though most never know. Manchester chose you when you lit that first candle, not to mourn, but to remember." She stared at the lamp between them. "What are these really? Spirits, memories, or just my grief finding shapes in the dark?" He smiled slightly. "All three. Grief is the root of memory, and memory is the first kind of light. The city was built on thousands of small losses, each one left a spark behind. Long ago, a handful of lamplighters learned to tend those sparks, so the living would never forget the kindness of the dead. I was one of them." Anna's breath caught. "You've been doing this for centuries." "Time doesn't measure us," he said softly. "We belong to the hours between dusk and dawn. When people stopped believing that lamps could remember, most of us faded into stories. But the light never truly goes out. It waits for a keeper." She felt tears rise, not of sorrow, but of understanding. And now the city needs a living keeper. One who still feels the pulse beneath the smoke. You have already begun. Each time you lit a lamp, someone's forgotten kindness stirred again. Children sleep easier, old friends forgive, strangers offer warmth to one another. You've given the light back its voice. Anna looked around. The square shimmered with faint outlines, men and women, children, workers, soldiers, all formed of translucent gold. They stood quietly, not haunting, but blessing. The city's memory gathered like a gentle choir. Above them, the cathedral windows caught the sunlight and scattered it into the fog, turning it into rivers of color. Elias stepped closer. "Every lamplighter leaves one flame behind," he said. "When I fade, mine will stay with you. Through it, you'll hear the lamps when they whisper." She reached out. "You're leaving?" He nodded, the faintest sadness touching his smile. "Light can't linger in one form forever. It passes from hand to hand, heart to heart. That's how cities survive their own shadows." He opened his palm. Within it burned a single, perfect spark, the heart of every lamp she had ever seen. He placed it into her hands. It felt warm, impossibly light, like holding breath made visible. The moment it touched her skin, memory flooded through her. The woman who had waited by the river, the laughter of children chasing light in the mills, the smell of bread at dawn, the hum of wheels on stone. She saw not ghosts, but lives ordinary, luminous lives, woven together by compassion. When the flood of images faded, the spark had sunk into her palm, leaving a faint mark shaped like a small sun. Elias stepped back. Now you carry the heart of the city. When darkness grows, you'll know which flame to kindle. Will I see you again? She asked. Whenever a lamp trembles between burning and going out, he said. That's where I live. He lifted his hand in farewell, and his form dissolved into a swirl of golden dust that rose toward the lamp. The flame brightened, then steadied, holding the color of dawn. Around the square, other lamps flickered to life, though it was still daylight. The hum returned, soft and low, the sound of the city remembering itself. Anna stood alone in the circle, but loneliness no longer felt empty. The silence around her was full of voices, of light, of peace. She knelt and traced the chalk line with her finger until it blended into the stone. When she looked up again, the world had resumed its ordinary motion, carts, laughter, footsteps. Yet everything seemed lighter, as if Manchester itself had taken a deep, grateful breath. Years unfolded gently. People began to speak of the Lady of the Lamps, a quiet woman who walked the streets at dusk, and whose presence made even the fog seem golden. They said the lamps she tended never went out, even in the harshest winter winds. Some swore she could fix a broken lamp with only a whisper. Others said the light around her made the weary sleep peacefully. Anna never claimed those stories, but she did not deny them. She lived simply, carrying her candle and her notebook, teaching a few others to listen to the hum beneath the gaslight. On evenings, when rain veiled the city, she would sit by her window and write down the day. Small mercies, a baker who shared bread, a child who helped an old man cross the street, a song sung softly by factory girls walking home. Each kindness was another spark, another memory for the lamps to hold. One spring night, many years later, she walked again to the cathedral square. Her hair had silvered, but her step was sure. The old lamp still stood, and when she touched it, warmth answered. She whispered, "The lights are safe," and the flame leaped gently in reply. She closed her eyes, feeling the rhythm of the city pulse through her chest. For a moment, she thought she saw Elias beside her again, not as a ghost, but as part of the light itself, his face calm, his eyes bright with the reflection of 1,000 lamps. Then the vision faded, leaving only the quiet glow of evening. She returned home, lit her candle one last time, and watched its flame steady itself in the still air. Outside, Manchester breathed, alive with memory and peace. The candle's light danced across her face, reflecting the city's endless heartbeat. When sleep came, it was gentle and complete. Generations passed. The mills fell silent. Electric bulbs replaced the gas lamps. Yet, in certain corners of the city by the river, near the old square, along narrow alleys that tourists seldom walked, the lights still burned with a warmer hue, softer than glass should allow. On winter nights, lamplighters, who serviced the new bulbs, sometimes reported hearing a faint humming, almost like a lullaby, woven through the wires. Some said it was just the wind in the arches. Others said the city was dreaming. And sometimes, when fog covered Manchester and the streets emptied, a faint figure could be seen walking slowly between the lamps, a woman with a candle in her hand. Each time she passed, the light grew steadier, the air calmer. Those who glimpsed her swore they felt peace settle over them, as if someone had remembered their name after many years. They called her the Guardian of Light, though few believed she had ever been real. Yet when the first snow of winter touched the river, and the lamps shimmered gold instead of white, the people of Manchester would pause for a heartbeat, take a deep breath, and smile without knowing why. Because somewhere in the city's quiet soul, a single candle still burned in a window aflame that would never go out. And the city remembered, always. They were men of soil before they were men of war. Their hands were shaped by plows, not muskets, and the rhythm that ruled their days was the steady breath of the land. Morning light spilled over the Massachusetts hills, touching rows of young corn, glinting on the slow river that curved behind the barns. In those quiet moments, before the roosters called, the farmers of the colonies thought only of the day's work ahead, mending fences, milking cows, sowing seed into the dark, patient earth. Yet beneath that calm, the world was changing. Rumors drifted with the spring wind, whispers of red-coated soldiers marching, of taxes and laws written an ocean away, of freedom spoken in taverns after dusk. The men listened in silence, their eyes thoughtful. They had built homes with their own hands. They knew what it meant to labor for every inch of peace, and they wondered how long that peace would hold. When the call came, it did not arrive like thunder, but like a tremor through the ground. A messenger rode from village to village, his horse lathered with sweat, his voice breaking the morning stillness. The British are coming out. The cry leaped from mouth to mouth, across fields and fences, through open windows and along stone walls slick with dew. Within moments, men were pulling coats over nightshirts, reaching for powder horns and flintlocks that had hung unused since their fathers' days. They kissed their wives once, quickly, and left the smell of bread still warm on the tables. The wind carried the faint tolling of bells, church bells, meeting bells calling them not to worship but to stand. They gathered on village greens, uncertain, solemn, some barefoot, some still in work clothes. The youngest were little more than boys. The oldest had gray in their beards, and the slow, deliberate movement of men who knew pain. Yet there was a stillness among them, a shared breath. They were not soldiers, they were farmers, blacksmiths, weavers, teachers, but they stood shoulder to shoulder beneath the same soft sky, bound by something greater than training, the quiet belief that their lives, however small, belonged to themselves. The road to Concord wound through fields of new grass. The sun climbed slowly, spilling pale gold over the countryside. Along that road they waited, the line of Minutemen stretching like a single thought across the ridge. In the distance came the rhythmic tramp of boots, the gleam of metal catching light. The redcoats moved with practiced order, their uniforms perfect, their drums steady. For a moment, time itself seemed to hold its breath between two kinds of men, the trained and the ordinary, empire and earth. The first shot came not from command, but from impulse, a crack so small it might have been mistaken for the breaking of a branch. Yet it split history open. Smoke curled upward, white against the morning. The air filled with the smell of powder and the startled cries of birds lifting from the trees. For the farmers, it was not glory they felt, but disbelief, as though the world had turned and found them standing on its edge. Some reloaded with shaking hands, others simply watched the smoke drift away, realizing that in that moment they had crossed a line that could never be recrossed. When the firing ended, silence returned in broken pieces, footsteps retreating, the far cry of a wounded horse, the wind moving through the wheat. The Minutemen stood among the fallen, their hearts pounding like hammers. They had not fought for conquest or pride. They had fought because something inside them refused to kneel. They looked down at their muskets, rough and worn, and then at their hands, the same hands that had sowed seed, now marked with soot and trembling. The earth beneath their boots was the same soil they had plowed at dawn, only now it held the echo of gunfire. That night, when the fires burned low and the stars returned, the men sat together in the fields. Some spoke softly of home. Others said nothing at all. The frogs in the marsh sang their unchanging song, and the river glowed faintly with moonlight. For a moment, they could almost believe the day had been a fever dream. Yet the smell of powder lingered, mingled with the smoke of their campfires. It was a scent that would follow them for years, woven into their clothes, into their sleep. In the days that followed, word spread like light on water. From one colony to the next, men left their farms and took up arms. The pattern repeated, tools set down, fields left waiting, families standing in doorways, watching them go. The war was not yet a war. It was a gathering of hearts, each beating quietly toward a single cause. They called themselves Minutemen because they could be ready in 60 seconds, but readiness meant far more than speed. It meant the willingness to leave everything familiar at a moment's notice to trade the rhythm of harvest for the rhythm of march. The countryside changed with them. Barns became armories, church halls echoed with the sound of drills, and blacksmiths forged musket parts alongside horseshoes. Yet, even in this transformation, the essence of the farmer remained. They carried the patience of seed sowers into the ranks, the endurance of plowmen into the marches. When they camped at night, they tended the fires as they once tended crops, carefully, faithfully. Some wrote letters home that smelled of smoke and earth. Their words, simple: tell the children I love them, keep the fields alive. Seasons turned. Snow covered the ground where battles had burned. The Minutemen became soldiers by necessity, though they never lost the plainness of their beginnings. They learned to march through mud, to sleep in cold, to hold their fire until command was sure. But they also learned songs that made the nights bearable, melodies rising softly through tents, blending with the creak of branches and the sigh of wind. Those who heard them from afar said it sounded like prayer carried on breath. In quiet moments between campaigns, they spoke of the lives waiting for them, the barns that needed roofs, the tools rusting in sheds, the children who would be taller when they returned. They imagined the smell of hay, the feel of sun-warmed wood, the laughter of wives calling them in for supper. These thoughts were their armor, stronger than any uniform. For every battle, every march, every cold dawn began with that same simple hope: to come home and be farmers again. Years would pass before that hope was realized. The war stretched on, distant and near, victories and losses braided together like the furrows of their forgotten fields. Yet the spirit of those first Minutemen never faded. Wherever the cause faltered, their memory rekindled it. They were proof that courage could be ordinary, that freedom could be tilled from common soil. Each man who lifted a musket in later years carried, knowingly or not, a trace of their steadiness, the calm that comes from understanding seasons, from trusting that after winter there must come spring. When peace finally returned, the survivors went back to their land. The fields were overgrown, the fences broken, but the earth received them without judgment. They set to work in silence, turning soil that had lain idle, planting new seed with the same careful hands that once had loaded powder. The world they had left was not the same, and neither were they. Yet the rhythm returned, the creak of wagons, the call of crows, the patient swing of the scythe. In the evenings they sat on porches, watching the sunset spread across the hills, and in that color they saw the faint reflection of battle smoke, softened now into memory. Children would ask them, years later, what it had been like the day the first shot was fired, the moment they stood against the redcoats. The old men would smile and shake their heads. They would speak not of blood or fear, but of the morning light on the river, of neighbors standing together, of the strange calm that had settled over them just before the smoke. They would say, "We were farmers first. The rest came after." And the children would nod, not fully understanding, yet sensing that something sacred had passed through those simple words. As time moved on and generations folded into one another, monuments rose, parades marched, and songs were written. Yet, in quiet corners of New England, the truest memorial remained the fields themselves, the same land those men had left and returned to, still bearing crops, still breathing in rhythm with the wind. When dusk fell and the crickets began their hymn, it was easy to imagine the faint echo of drums within the breeze, not of war, but of steadfast hearts keeping time. The Minutemen are long gone, their muskets silent, their names faded on stone, but the idea they carried endures like the season's ordinary people, ready when needed, guided not by anger but by quiet conviction. Their courage was not the roar of battle, it was the whisper of resolve. Theirs was not a march toward glory, but a walk through mist toward dawn, and in that gentle light, every furrowed field, every humble home, every soft bell in the valley still remembers them. If you stand in those meadows today, when the morning fog curls low and the first bird calls across the ridge, you can almost hear it. The faint rustle of boots in grass, the sigh of a musket, lifted the heartbeat of a farmer who became a soldier for a moment in time. Then the sound fades, replaced by wind through wheat, and peace settles again. The land has forgiven the noise of war, keeping only its meaning, that freedom, like the harvest, must be tended with care, with patience, and with love. So sleep now, knowing that in every quiet place there are lights still burning, small farmhouse lamps, soft and steady, tended by the memory of those who once stood watch. Their spirit moves through the hills like a warm breath over the fields, and as the stars return to the sky they defended, the world whispers back to them the only promise it can keep: you are remembered. You are home.